Mexico City, 1998. Before the first alarm, before the vault floor cracked, before the floodlights turned night into surgical white, there was a sound. A faint, rhythmic tapping beneath the asphalt. Like someone chiseling the heartbeat of the city itself. Above, the metropolis roared, buses, vendors, exhaust, life. Below, in the earth's forgotten corridors, men were digging toward God's money. The Banco de la Reserva Federal de México, the Federal Reserve's southern arm, stood like a fortress at the heart of Paseo de la Reforma. 74 cameras. Concrete walls 2 meters thick. Vault doors imported from Chicago. Impossible, they said. Impenetrable, the papers wrote. But in August 1998, a crew of 6 ordinary men, engineers, miners, and ex-soldiers, decided to prove that nothing buried in money or in concrete stays untouchable forever. Their leader, Carlos Mendez, had a rule. You never fight the guards above. You go under them. And so, he led his crew, not through the front doors, but through the underbelly of Mexico City, in what would become one of the most mysterious, silent, and perfectly executed heists in Latin American history. It started with blueprints. Not the kind found in archives, but in memory. Mendez, 42, a former metro construction foreman, once oversaw drainage tunnels under the city. He knew how the ground shifted, how vibrations traveled, how to measure a wall's thickness by its echo. After an injury forced him into early retirement, he drifted, until a chance reunion with Luis El Sapo Dominguez, a former army sapper, over cheap mezcal changed his fate. There's a river of cash down there, Luis said. And no one's guarding the riverbed. Together they began assembling a team. Rafael Ortega, a geologist with tremor sensors once used in mine safety inspections. Paco Hernandez, a taxi driver who moonlighted as a smuggler. El Zurdo, a quiet electrician who could bypass alarms with surgical precision. And finally, Isidro, a welder whose record read, Tres Años, Penal del Norte, theft of public property. They met at an abandoned mechanics shop 2 blocks from the Reforma. On a dusty table lay a rolled schematic. One Mendez drew himself from memory. The sewer grid from the 1970 S.1 tunnel, marked in red ink, ran directly beneath the bank's western wall. They would dig from a rented basement, a fake shoe repair shop registered under a borrowed ID, toward the bank's foundation. The distance, 42 meters. The timeline, 6 months. They called it Proyecto Silencio. Each man had a task, a schedule, and a vow. If one spoke, they all fell. And in that silence, Mexico City went on, oblivious, as the greatest bank tunnel in its history began, under its own feet. The first shovel hit dirt on February 3, 1998. Mendez stood barefoot in the narrow corridor of the basement, feeling the vibrations through the ground. The city above was alive, cars, footsteps, horns, and each sound masked their own. They worked at night, timing the drilling to traffic lights and bus brakes. Rafael installed seismometers scavenged from university labs to monitor for detection. Each time a reading spiked, they froze, listening for sirens. Then the digging continued. Luis mixed concrete dust with coffee grounds to disguise the soil smell. The waste dirt was packed into old tires and sold to a nearby construction crew. No one ever questioned why the shoe shop always had mud-stained boots at its door. By March, they'd advanced 19 meters. They supported the tunnel with wooden beams scavenged from old railway sleepers, then covered it with spray-on concrete for stability. Inside, it was a second world, hot, claustrophobic, echoing. A string of fluorescent bulbs hung from nails. Every 12 meters, a radio marker transmitted a pulse Luis could hear on a frequency only he knew. In the stillness, Mendez would whisper, almost in prayer. No bullets. No masks. Just the earth and us. They were craftsmen, sculptors of crime, not killers. But by April, the first crack appeared, not in the walls, but in loyalty. Isidro began to drink. He complained about the heat, the hours, the risk. Half a year underground, he said. For what? We could rob 3 armored trucks by now. Mendez warned him, trucks bleed noise. Tunnels don't. But fear spread faster than dust. The crew knew the deeper they went, the heavier the secret became. When Raphael's sensor picked up an unexplained vibration one night, a deep hum that wasn't traffic, panic set in. They killed the lights and pressed their ears to the soil. Then they heard it, a drilling sound. From another direction. For 2 nights they believed someone else was tunneling toward them, maybe the police, maybe another crew. Then Raphael realized the truth. It was the subway expansion project, 2 blocks away. Still, the paranoia stayed. Mendez doubled the night shifts and shortened breaks. He stopped going home altogether, sleeping on a cot near the tunnel mouth. He started recording every entry, every meter advanced, in a small black notebook, one that would later become police evidence. On May 10th, Luis collapsed from exhaustion. They carried him out before dawn, wrapped in a tarp, and took him to a clinic where he gave his name as Hernando Ruiz. He returned 2 days later, pale but determined. Almost there, he said. I can smell the money. He wasn't wrong. By late June, the crew reached the vault's outer perimeter, a reinforced concrete wall, 40 centimeters thick. Mendez ran his fingers along the vibration sensors Raphael planted and smiled. Listen, he said. You can hear the hum of the vault door. They drilled a small pilot hole, 5 centimeters wide, and inserted a fiber optic scope. On the other side was heaven, rows of deposit boxes, stacks of sealed currency bags, and pallets of US bills awaiting redistribution. Raphael's voice trembled. How much do you think? Mendez, more than we can carry. They scheduled the breach for July 10th, during a weekend maintenance shutdown when power would be partially off. To muffle the sound, they packed blankets around the drill, poured cement dust into the pilot cavity, and timed the breakthrough with a passing subway rumble. The final cut took 7 hours. When the last slab gave way, the tunnel filled with the cold metallic scent of the vault. They crawled through, men covered in soot, faces streaked with lime, eyes reflecting the glow of the bank's emergency lights. No alarms. No guards. Just silence. For 2 hours, they moved through stacks of cash, $160 million pesos, foreign currency, bearer bonds. They loaded what they could, about 28 million US dollars equivalent, into military-grade duffel bags. Then Mendez saw something else, sealed crates marked with federal insignia, labeled, confidential, Hacienda. He broke one open, inside, not money, but ledgers. Account transfers, offshore deposits, names of politicians. We came for money, Luis said. We just found something worth more. But Mendez hesitated. Paper leaves a trail. Take the cash. Leave the ghosts. They obeyed. By dawn, the tunnel was sealed behind them. The bank opened Monday morning to find nothing missing, yet. Because the theft wasn't discovered until 3 days later, when humidity caused the vault floor to sink slightly, revealing a hollow sound. When investigators opened the floor panel, they found the hole, and a note taped to a beam. Sin armas, sin violencia, solo ingenio. Without weapons, without violence, only ingenuity. By the time authorities realized what had happened, the crew was gone. The shoe shop was empty, lease paid 6 months in advance. The tunnel mouth was flooded with cement. And Mendez? He vanished into the sprawl of the capital. Interpol flagged the cash as unrecoverable within days. Much of it had already entered exchange houses across Tijuana, Monterrey, and Panama. But one trail emerged: Rafael's sensor equipment, traced to a university grant account. Federal agents raided his apartment, and found him already dead. An apparent suicide, though neighbors swore they'd seen 2 men in suits hours earlier. Luis disappeared a week later. Paco was arrested on a smuggling charge but found dead in holding. Heart attack, they said. It seemed someone was erasing the crew, one by one. Mendez's black notebook resurfaced months later, mailed anonymously to a journalist at El Universal. Inside were coordinates, dates, and one line written on the last page. If this reaches you, the money is clean, but the secret isn't. A year after the heist, investigators reopened the case under federal pressure. The missing, confidential, hacienda crates appeared on black market intelligence lists. Someone had stolen the ledgers after all. Within them were alleged connections between cartel accounts, foreign investments, and names inside the Mexican Treasury Department. Whispers said the crew had been eliminated not for the money, but for the paper. Detective Jamie Alarcón, the last officer still on record investigating the case, later told a reporter off tape. The tunnel wasn't the point. It was the distraction. He died in a car crash 2 weeks later. 25 years later, the tunnel still exists, sealed by concrete, forgotten by traffic above. But every few years, utility workers claim they hear hollow echoes near the Reforma district. In 2023, a subway expansion unearthed a fragment of reinforced concrete with drill marks, old, dated, but deliberate. A maintenance engineer described it simply: like a lung under the city. Dead, but still breathing. The true value of what was taken remains unknown. The official figure lists $28 million, but rumors whisper that what vanished was closer to trust in a system that preached security yet buried its corruption deep below. And in some quiet corner of Mexico City, perhaps beneath a new building or under the weight of fresh concrete, lies the echo of the men who once turned dirt into destiny. Without weapons. Without violence. Only ingenuity. Every great city carries 2 hearts. One that beats above the ground, and another that echoes beneath it. Mexico City is no different. Above, there's light, trade, and politics. But below, there are tunnels, pipes, and forgotten stories still whispering in the dark. In 1998, 6 men dug not just through the earth, but through the illusion of safety, through concrete meant to separate law from ambition. They turned geology into strategy, and silence into a weapon sharper than any gun. When the world finally noticed, it was too late. No bullets were fired. No guards were killed. Only the ground itself had been persuaded to open and swallow millions. And yet, money was never the truest treasure they uncovered. Because when they reached the heart of the vault, they found something far more dangerous than currency. Proof. Proof that even institutions wrapped in holiness and hierarchy can rot from the inside. Proof that greed wears suits, signs contracts, and hides behind vault doors. The government buried the evidence, the press buried the story, and the earth buried the tunnel. But history doesn't forget that easily. Some nights, under the constant hum of Reforma Avenue, engineers still swear they hear faint vibrations. Not earthquakes, not trains. But the low, rhythmic thud of men at work, digging, laughing, dreaming of a freedom bought with dust. Maybe that's what the Mexico City heist really was? Not a theft, but a statement. A reminder that walls, vaults, and systems are only as strong as the silence that protects them. It said Mendez left one final line in his notebook before disappearing forever. The money was heavy, but the truth weighed more. And that's the paradox of every great crime. Sometimes, the heist isn't about what's stolen. It's about what's revealed. Beneath the concrete veins of Mexico City still sleeps their story. Not as ghosts, but as engineers of defiance, buried between greed and genius. They took nothing that wasn't already taken from them. They broke no bones, spilled no blood. They simply built a tunnel, and a legend. And as long as cities keep secrets, there will always be someone, somewhere, listening for the sound beneath the streetlights. Without weapons. Without violence. Only ingenuity.